Welcome to Channel's Business Global with me, Juliana Alena, from our studios here in London. Coming up on today's show, Britain's state opening of Parliament took place this week, a day full of pomp and ceremony to set out the government's legislative programme for the year ahead. The event witnessed the first such speech from King Charles III since assuming the throne last year. Our business correspondent Simon Pusey will soon be joining me to talk us through the announcements. And pressure is mounting on the UK opposition leader to quit the party over his refusal to push for a ceasefire in Gaza. Harry Burns, the former head of elections and campaign support for the Labour Party, will shortly be joining me with the latest. Then later, I'll be looking back at some of the biggest business news stories of the week. But first, on Tuesday, King Charles III delivered the UK's first King's speech in 70 years, setting out Rishi Sunak's legislative plans for the upcoming year. According to the speech, the Prime Minister's priority over the next 12 months will be increasing economic growth and safeguarding the health and security of the British people for generations to come. Overall, there were 21 different measures introduced, with a focus on oil and gas exploration, a ban on smoking, and tougher criminal justice sentencing.
My government will, in all respects, seek to make long-term decisions in the interests of future generations. My ministers will address inflation and the drivers of low growth over demands for greater spending or borrowing. My ministers will put the security of communities and the nation ahead of the rights of those who endanger it. By taking these long-term decisions, my government will change this country and build a better future. Members of the House of Commons, estimates for the public services will be laid before you. My Lords and members of the House of Commons, other measures will be laid before you. I pray that the blessing of Almighty God may rest upon your counsels.
Well, for more on this, I was earlier joined in the studio by our business correspondent, Simon Pusey. Simon, so the state opening of Parliament took place on Tuesday. Very pomp and ceremonious, of course, but it is important because the monarch sets out Parliament's legislative agenda for the year ahead. Of course, first time King Charles III is doing it as king, although he did it last year, didn't he, representing the Queen. He has a very strong personality. Talk to us about what happened, why it takes place, and some of the key moments.
Yeah, one of the many archaic things that we have in our constitution. This is obviously hundreds of years ago. The king or queen at the time would have a lot of power in terms of the rules of the land and the laws. And as time has gone on, those two have separated. The government make the laws and the rules, and the monarch is much more sort of representative and a figurehead. And this is where the two sort of collide in a way. The figurehead reads out the objectives and the agenda of the government of the time, saying this is what we're going to do over the next 12 months in Parliament, and they can't really have any influence. They can't really change anything. Obviously, the king or queen, but currently the king, meets the Prime Minister of the time once a week to talk through what's happening in the country, and they can offer advice, but they aren't really supposed to get involved in politics or in policy. And obviously we've been hearing quite a lot recently that Charles is a little bit more close to the line than the Queen was in terms of how much the King sort of would like to, you know, put his personality or his views forward.
Especially on the environment.
And this is going to be the thing, or is the thing, with this state opening of Parliament, because some of the things that Rishi Sunak and the Conservatives are doing are trying to get the economy going a little bit more by doing away with some of the green policies that King Charles, we know, really likes, because he's such so keen on conservation and the environment. So the main thing this year is criminal justice. That's at the heart of this King's speech, and it's things like sentencing, so to ensure more whole life sentences are given out. There'll be a pledge for a criminal justice bill to give tough sentences to grooming gangs. Plans also to introduce and award new oil and gas licenses. That's one
very
King Charles would definitely not be in favour of, and yeah, a lot of climate activists saying that, how are we going to meet our net zero policy, which Rishi Sunak still says we're on course to meet. There are various other things, but I think the whole point of this really is, and what one minister said to journalists recently, is that this is all a bit meh. This is all a bit, this is non-consequential. This is all like papering around the cracks, trying to but there's no big one policy that's going to be a vote winner at the next general election. And it's all a bit kind of boring, really.
Yeah. And expensive. They pulled out the stocks, didn't they, for this? I think it's one of the biggest pomp and ceremonious state openings we've seen in years.
Yeah, I think the interesting thing is to see the King doing something that, like you said, he was there on behalf of the Queen last year when she was ill or she was not feeling up to it. But yeah, that'll be the most interesting thing that happens here. And also, of course, with the fact that King Charles does not support a lot of these policies that he's reading out, especially when it comes to conservation. The Labour Party obviously say that this is a government out of ideas. Everything is rehashed. We've already heard a lot of this before, and there are no new policies sort of being announced. But I think, the main thing is the pomp and ceremony that we love in this country and that the rest of the world loves.
Absolutely. Got to get your take on this very quickly, because another big talking point has got to be Armistice Weekend, the 11th of the 11th, when we remember our Britain's war heroes. There are going to be pro-Palestinian marches. Now, of course, those demonstrating are doing it for peace. That's what they say they're doing it for. But we have seen anti-Semitic sloganism, really hateful rhetoric in some parts of the marches. Suella Braverman, she's called them hateful marches. Are they going to take place this weekend?
Yeah, so I think the march that is planned, they say that they're not going to be at the Cenotaph,
right,
and that it's not going to be at the same time that those Armistice Day, Remembrance Day services take place. I think the fear is that with all of these marches, you have tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of people turning up, and the vast majority of those people are there for peaceful, but you will always get a couple of rogue, and even if it's 10 or 20 people out of those thousands, that is still going to make the headlines. So I think that's the worry here. And you also get people on the other side of the politics who are, very, very keen for Armistice Day, obviously to go ahead respectfully. I think there's almost a sense that they're kind of wanting this to happen so that there can be this kind of culture war clash, especially at the right of the sort of right-wing party elements of the country are kind of looking for this so that we can bring to a head. And, I don't know if that'll happen. I'm not sure what's going to happen. I think it'll be... There's been a lot of hype around this, so I think police will be out in force to try and make sure that order is restored. And it's not like they're going out to do it specifically because of this day, because every Saturday over the last couple of weeks there has been marches like this. So I think, the ceasefire marches and calling for peace in Gaza will continue. Unfortunately, looking at the situation there, it doesn't look like that's going to come anytime soon. Although more and more countries, the United Nations now very rarely calling as one for a ceasefire, because every day we see more and more death and atrocities happening in Gaza. So, but I don't think anyone really wants there to be. The Armistice Day and Remembrance Sunday are very big occasions here to mark the millions of people that died in the world wars. So I don't think anyone wants that to be ruined or wants that sort of memory to be hijacked by a couple of people who are trying to cause trouble. But the police, the commissioner says that they've been looking at this for several weeks now, and hopefully that'll all go smoothly.
Yes, hopefully. We'll talk about it next week. Thanks, Simon. So Keir Starmer's Labour Party is miles ahead of Prime Minister Rishi Sunak's Conservatives in the polls, and with the UK seemingly desperate for change after 13 years of Tory rule, victory at the next general election seems likely. However, in recent days, Starmer has been urged to resign due to his refusal to back calls for a ceasefire in the war between Israel and Hamas. Well, for more on this, I'm now being joined by Harry Burns. Harry is the Vice President of Crestview Strategy, and he's the former head of elections and campaign support for the UK's Labour Party. Harry Burns, it's always a pleasure having you on Channel's Business Global. So Sir Keir Starmer is facing a massive rebellion by left-wing Labour MPs. For those of us not in the UK, not savvy to this discussion, why is this happening?
Well, look, amongst the left side of politics in the UK and actually all around the world, is a sizable proportion of them believe that the greatest threat to security and to workers' rights around the world is from imperialism, and they see the greatest imperial power as being the United States, and they see Israel as an extension of the US imperialism. So they instinctively will side with any group who are what they believe is a subject of US or Israeli imperialism. That's why the Palestinian cause has always sparked such strong feelings amongst the left side of British politics. But I think obviously, anybody, you don't have to be on the left of politics to be disturbed by what has happened in Israel and Palestine over the past few weeks. And it certainly is a challenge that is facing all politicians around the world about how they respond.
Absolutely. You said it's been a few weeks. Yes. November 7th marks a month since the awful attacks by Hamas in Israel. And of course, it is getting worse. Thousands of people have died. Coming back to Sakir, more than 30 Labour councillors have quit the party. And according to the data I read this morning in The Independent, 330 local leaders have urged him to resign. Do you think this is growing into a much larger problem for him? Because before we just thought it was one or two, but now it seems to be growing in momentum and size.
Well, it certainly is. It certainly is a challenge for Sakir. I mean, it's not really that surprising, given that a sizable amount of Labour's supporters in the UK are from Islamic backgrounds. Some of Labour's most safe Labour seats are majority or large minority Muslims. Constituencies, which means that people have to speak to the causes that their constituents care most deeply about. And for lots of Labour MPs and Labour councillors, it is the biggest issue of today is Israel-Palestine and the plight of the Palestinian people. So I don't know if it's necessarily getting bigger. Obviously, there was this letter. I think this is something that Labour knew from day one. It was going to be a very difficult internal political battle for the leadership to try and forge a moderate path on this issue, because it's something that has inflamed passions in the Labour Party for many, many years.
Harry, we understand, most sane people understand that what took place in Israel on the 7th of October was unjustifiable. It cannot be justified. Of course, we want the hostages to be returned safely. We've seen the family members crying on TV. We get that. We're also seeing thousands of civilians being killed in Gaza. Why on earth is it so controversial or seen as anti-Semitic to call for a ceasefire? This is not saying that Hamas should be let go. This is saying, can we please stop the killing of innocents? Why is that so controversial for British politicians to utter?
Well, I think in all these sorts of seemingly intractable situations where we are all powerless to actually impact what is going on, people focus on words, they focus on definitions, they focus on the online battles that people have back and forth over the language used about an issue. Is it a genocide? Is it, as you were saying, should there be a ceasefire? So oftentimes people will focus on that as a means of laying down what they stand for, what they believe in. For lots of people who are supporting Israel and supporting the Israeli position, they, I think, would likely say that you can't have a ceasefire with an organization whose entire charter is dedicated to the total destruction of their state. And driving them into the sea. So I think Israel would see it as a one-sided ceasefire, that pressure is only being put on them to halt to the hostilities. So I think within the Labour movement, Keir Starmer has been very clear that he wants humanitarian pauses, that he wants to see aid go into Gaza, that he wants to see people be evacuated, and he thinks that is both the most politically sensible position and the one that is actually going to be achievable, because I don't think Israel is necessarily going to stop anytime soon, but Netanyahu did certainly say today that he is thinking about taking small pauses which will allow aid to flow into Gaza, hopefully in a sort of serious and substantive way.
I think that's pretty clear from you. Harry Burns, Vice President of Crestview Strategy. Always a pleasure feasting upon your expertise. Thank you, Harry. Welcome back to Channel's Business Global with me, Juliana Alena, from our studios here in London. In a moment, I'll be sharing an interview I recently conducted with Godson Azu, the CEO of management consultancy firm Cater & Merger. But until then, here's a breakdown of the biggest business news stories of the week. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has announced that the EU will increase humanitarian aid to Gaza by €25 million. The development follows talks between the US Secretary of State Antony Blinken and the government of Cyprus about the creation of a maritime aid corridor from the island to the heavily bombarded and besieged Gaza Strip. Since the Hamas attack 4 weeks ago, supplies of water, electricity, fuel and food have been cut off to the impoverished and densely populated territory. Shared office firm Wework has filed for bankruptcy in the US after years of struggle and failure to recover from COVID-19 pandemic-induced losses. The company, once valued at $47 billion, endured a 98% decline in its share price this year, leaving it with a market capitalization of less than $50 million. The bankruptcy will affect the company's businesses in the US and Canada, while other co-working spaces around the world are not affected at this time. India's capital city is to implement license plate-based driving bans to restrict the number of cars on its roads as it battles to clean up the world's most polluted air. Beginning next week, cars with license plates ending in odd and even numbers will run on alternate days for a week as part of steps to lower emissions. Delhi has implemented temporary driving bans several times in the past to reduce pollution. In the past few days, however, the Indian capital has been topping the charts of the world's most polluted cities. Now to my final topic. Last month, Channel's TV London Bureau were named Best Diaspora Media House of the Year at the annual London Political Summit and Awards. The convener of the event is the management consultancy firm Cater & Merger, who have hosted a series of investment and trade missions from Nigeria to the United Kingdom. A few days ago, Mr. Godson Azu, author and the CEO of the group, joined me here in our London studios to shed some insights on his very busy year thus far. Mazi, Godson Azu, thank you so much for joining me in the Channel's Business Global studio. And I've got to say, not just on behalf of the Channel's TV London Bureau, we've got Femi here, Javed behind the wall, and of course so many others, but across the Channel's family. I want to thank you so much for honouring us at the recently held London Political Summit and Awards. This is the second time that the Bureau has been recognised. So a heartfelt thank you for that. It has been a couple of years since you've been in the studio and we've discussed what you've been doing because you're incredibly busy, not just you, but the huge team behind Cater & Merger Consultants, which isn't just a Nigerian communications firm, it's Pan-African. You've got some heavy hitters on the board, so thank you so much. I want you to talk to me about what you've been doing over the past couple of months, because I know it started off in the summer with a huge delegation you brought from Nigeria. It's then gone on to subsequent events, and I know that the House of Lords as well as the British government have been involved. Talk to me about what you've been doing and whether or not you were able to achieve the aims and visions.
Thank you very much, Juliana Alena, and it's my humble and great pleasure having to honor Channels TV UK Bureau Office and the entire Channels family because we have a team that censors the programs and the diasporic presentation of most of the Nigerian channels here in the diaspora, and who felt that channels kind of fitting into the kind of broadcasting expectations within the diasporan community in terms of information dissemination and in terms of balancing the argument with your program, also especially the business show, which
which you're sitting on right now.
Which I watch most of the time, trying to balance the argument and the economic challenges that we face both here in the UK and what is going on back in Nigeria. So it's an honor, and we look forward probably next year if the channels still meet the merit to gain that platform again. Yeah, thank you very much for having me this morning. It's been a while. I've been on your show, and it's my pleasure back here again. Yeah, we've been doing a lot over the year. We actually had the UK Nigerian Trade Mission Summit around June this year, where we had delegations from Nigerian Ministry of Water Resources and the Nigerian River Basin Development Authority. We had a couple of private sector delegations, businesses in the agro sector that came in, and it was an awesome moment of about 3-4 days of activities in London. We had engagement with Wanis, we had engagement with Tilda, the rice company in the UK. We had programs at the York St. John University that helped to host the summit conference. And we were able to pay a courtesy visit to the Lord Mayor of Birmingham City, who hosted the delegation, and there was a mutual exchange of friendship
between. I think we're showing some of those pictures now, and I'm so sorry to interject you, Mr. Godson, but of course, every single day I'm getting invited, whether it's to Parliament or to some other spectacular venue for an event, mostly to do with the Nigerian government. Lots of pictures, no action, no follow-up. I'm hoping that these events that you've had is having the action and the follow-up, because we're sick of talking, aren't we? We want things to move.
Yeah, well, there's a couple of follow-ups. After the event, I actually went to Nigeria, and one of the organizations that attended the summit in June have been attending our event, and we'll be making progress with them. It's called Agro-Allied Commodity and Services. They kind of have one of the largest cooperative farmers organization in Nigeria, and they've been looking for partnerships and looking for collaboration between companies and businesses in the UK. And we've been able to match them with about 3, 4, 5 organizations here in the UK. I was back in Nigeria around October. I had meetings with them, the entire team in Abuja. They were very happy for attending the event. They were happy with the links they were able to, the partnership they were able to create here in order to progress with their agro mechanized village project.
There is a lot of anger and tension at the moment. I don't know if it's fair to say that it's predominantly on social media, but certainly a lot of individuals are calling into question the brand. But it does appear as if the international community are courting us. What is your view on the perception of Nigeria across the world at the moment?
I think Nigeria, the perceptions still remain very, very complicated. There's still a bit of questionable issues which are surrounding the individual personalities that are in government at the moment.
Okay, characters.
And I believe that when characters are being questioned, when individual personalities are being queried, there is need to give an honest and a humble answers.
But that doesn't stop business, does it? That hasn't stopped
the
MPs wanting to
it hasn't.
It
hasn't because you see, in international business or international politics, it's mutual relationship. It's mutual benefit. It's about who gets the advantage of the opportunities and the circumstances surrounding whatever happens in that particular country or the other third party or second party country. So you find out that most international community players may tend to underlook or undercover the political
basically they don't care.
Discriminations or political disconnections or political challenges that Nigeria is facing, and concentrate on the economic benefit that the countries want to gain from the political differences in Nigeria. You find that Americans can't go anywhere where there is too much stabilities. They always look for where there is an issue. And when there's an issue, their multinational organizations strives. They make money. They make, like I keep telling people, you create problem to find solutions. And finding solution is an opportunity for big businesses to make money.
Mazi, Godson Azu, the CEO of Cater and Merger Consulting UK. I know you've got several other hats, but I'll just use that one today. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Well, sadly, that's all we have time for today, but as always, do get in touch with your comments and suggestions. I'll see you at the same time next week for more in-depth business analysis on Channel's Business Global. Goodbye.